Omnicom is on track to become the largest advertising holding company in the world. And today we're sitting down with Sergio Lopez, CEO of Omnicom Production, one of the most powerful figures in advertising production today. Sergio is leading one of the biggest shifts in production power the industry has ever seen. The background to this is that for years, as margins shrank, holding companies have been pulling more of the production pipeline in-house. But now, media spend is increasingly diversified across media platforms. Big data is shaping creative decisions on a daily basis, and brands are forced to react faster than ever to shifting consumer sentiment. So this is becoming more of a need, and production pipelines have to move at greater speed and with more adaptability to service their brands and their needs in this changing world. But that shift is incredibly controversial in the production community. After all, Omnicom owns some of the greatest agencies of all time. This is Goodby Silverstein and Partners, TBWA Chiat, 180, BBDO, Adam and Eve DDB. And those names may not mean a lot to the rest of the world, but to the advertising community, these are the faces on Mount Rushmore of advertising. They're incredibly creative, and they've done the work that's inspired creatives and producers over the last 50 years. And the fear is that centralizing production could strip agencies of the craft and control that elevate a good idea into a great one. But I guess in talking with Sergio, it's clear that this isn't about just capturing margin. It's about meeting a reality that many in the industry don't really want to face. Decision-making closer to the brand's needs is required if we want advertising creativity to survive at all. And it's easy to forget, brands are the clients. They're the ones paying the bills. So should their desire for speed and flexibility above all else be respected? Is it the job of creatives to fight for the old ways? Is it the job of creatives to be creative enough to reinvent themselves inside whatever new modality we're heading into next? Those are the questions at the heart of this conversation, and I really appreciate Sergio for sitting down with me to have it. Because the future of production isn't just about budgets and workflows. It's about whether the industry can adapt quickly enough to keep creativity relevant in a world moving faster and more commoditized than ever before. And Sergio Lopez is right at the center of that change. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I hope you stick around. Well, Sergio Lopez, thank you so much for doing this. You are CEO of Omnicom Production, which makes you, and I hope you won't mind me saying this, the most important man in global advertising production, which I think is pretty exciting.
Well, I mean, my remit is on the Omnicom production agencies, which is one of the largest production entities in the world, and it's been something that we've pulled together in the last year. I joined Omnicom in April last year, and in just 9 months, we had to do a big transformation project where we brought together all our 76 production units into one and created Omnicom Production and defined what we saw the future of production being.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to get into that because there's been a lot of talk, a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, I think, as well. There are so many advertising agencies sit underneath the Omnicom banner. Over 50% of the leading brands in America, certainly, and in the world, are represented by Omnicom agencies. And within that, there are agencies like Media Arts Lab, TBWA Chiat, Goodby Silverstein, Adam and Eve DDB, BBDO. There's so much talent within the network. And one of the things that you guys have been doing is centralizing the production resource as a service to the agencies. And I'd love to kind of talk about, why that's a different and unique offering and what that looks like.
In production has been built on the back of the agencies, which gives us a really good creative DNA. If you think about it, like Omnicom has been the holding company that over the last decade consistently has been in the top 2, top 3 most awarded agencies in the world. And like some of the other groups come in and out of that top 2, top 3. And yet Omnicom has consistently been there on the back of the work done on agencies like Goodby, TBWA, BBDO, Adam and Eve. The creative DNA is actually runs very deep. But now when we talk to clients, they have much bigger and much complex problems. They have problems on things that we've been talking about for the last decade. A lot of channels, social media, connected TV, like all these things. And on top of that number of things, which leads to complexity, there's been a couple of things that have been added in the last couple of years. One of them is the large clients or the larger clients that we deal with, when they try to build a strategy that is customer-centric, that is consumer-centric, they realize that consumers want a consistent customer experience. So when they When they look at the work on TV, it needs to be consistent to what they do on e-commerce on their website. It needs to be consistent with social. It needs to be consistent with the in-shopper experience. Think about brands like Apple, think about brands like Adidas. Like what you see on TV needs to be the experience that you have when you go to the shop. It needs to be consistent to what you buy on e-commerce. And when they look at the way that we've been doing work over the last 40, 50 years, for a client to do a global campaign, they have to engage with over 200 production suppliers or production people. And when I talk production, I'm not just talking about TV. I'm talking TV, video, content, print, digital. It's very difficult to have a seamless experience when you have 200 people tinkering with something. It's almost like saying, try to build something with 200 architects, right? Like try to paint a painting with 200 painters. It's really, really complicated. And that leads to a number of things. Branding consistency, big problem at a time where we know that what drives brands to do better is to be differentiated from the rest and have a very strong voice. So keeping that voice and that brand consistency, super important for performance. I'm sure that everybody's thinking, crap, 200 suppliers, the inefficiencies might be huge, right? Like 200 times explaining somebody what the campaign is all about, what it has to be done, what is the ethos of the campaign, what is the soul of this thing. Very, very complicated, very inefficient from a time point of view, very inefficient from a cost point of view. So what brands are looking at now is how can we have something, because everything that they do with the agencies at some point will have to be made. Production is the only thing that when you look at content, touches creative agencies, but it also touches media, it touches commerce. What would be an ecosystem for production look like, where all those things can live under one place? This is the moment where production has a seat at the table by itself, and that has to extract itself from being part of another unit because it becomes the unifier for everybody else.
Yeah, it becomes more like a studio rather than an individualized production entity.
Exactly. So it works a lot like an entertainment studio. It becomes something that it does continue to serve the creative agencies in the sense of building the creative opportunities, elevating the work. It does collaborate with independent production companies, but there are some conversations that production is having to have right now, which are a lot more evolved than the kind of things that we're talking about. Data is a big part of production. Automation is a big part of production. Global orchestration, things that when I joined the business, I had not a clue that I was going to be doing today, and things that I had to learn as I went on this journey. But as I've gone, I realized that is fundamental and basic for any brand.
And I think that as well, a lot of it is also reactivity, I imagine, because, when, in a world where your brand need can change between the time of signing off the creative and the actual ad awarding, a single tweet from the wrong person about your brand or something like that can fundamentally change the needs of the campaign. And in the existing system, if that change is made, hands go out all along the line going, well, you're making a change, so, I need to get paid for this change. And, that ripples all the way through from production companies to post houses to edit houses to sound design studios. And this is just the traditional production pipeline, let alone digital and websites and things like that, experiential. But I imagine that, what is also quite helpful is having the entire production pipeline, or as much of it as possible, within the Omnicom ecosystem. When the brand changes maybe a brief, you guys can take a broader view and go, well, we don't want to ruin the overall relationship for so many different vendors, having to put out their hands for more money and change of scope and things like that. We get to take the broader view, take that hit on the chin and make that a smoother process as well. So I imagine it also removes some of the friction points that often happen between agencies and clients during the process.
All of that, but it's maturing the way we work. Every time that I go and talk to a client that hasn't done this, anybody that looks at it is so obvious some of the things that need to be done. And when you almost like zoom back from because when we talk about production, again, we talk about production companies and editorial and post-production. That's a very small part of the process. Before that happens, or leading to that, for big brands, you have what is called the creation of the global toolkit, right? When you do what is the global idea and create all the assets that everybody's going to adapt. When you talk about reactivity, most large brands of some of the, I'm not going to say clients because obviously it will put people on the spot, it takes between 12 to 18 months, which means what you're seeing today is an idea that has been, by the time you do strategy, creative, testing, and then you start producing a lot of the work to get to that toolkit that then everybody has, it's 18 months. So imagine how disconnected with the consumer. That is, if you're talking about things that were a problem 18 months ago. 18 months ago, we had a different president in the United States, different policies, and you're seeing in other worlds. I mean, you see it on entertainment. That's part of when you see like Snow White, right? Like how Snow White was a movie that was done for a time where there were some concerns, and now it had a lot of problems, apart from some other things, but how it just didn't. There were some culturally some things had evolved or had transitioned to a different conversation and it backlash. For a brand, it's exactly the same. I mean, 18 months ago, we were coming out of pandemic, and now it feels almost cute, some of the things that we were talking about. So be able to work with a client to shorten that period, to say, you don't need 18 months. You can do things, even if you get from 18 months to 6 months. Then where you're doing work, you don't have to, some of those clients, then they're replicating those campaigns in different parts of the world. I cannot tell you how many clients they shoot in the same campaign in different countries. And what you win in relevance, sometimes you waste on efficiencies, which means that you cannot hire the talents that will make that campaign magic. So if you're shooting the same commercial 4 times in different parts of the world, you're dividing your production budget by 4. So instead of hiring the best director, the best DP, the best, you're bringing somebody who can do it for a quarter of the money, because the marketing budget is the marketing budget. And like everybody knows that a client does a marketing allocation based on sales. So there is no more money, right? So when people are saying clients want more for less, or they're squeezing us because they need to do exactly that, more for less. And if we don't help them find those efficiencies, or if we don't help them waste less money on things that don't add creative value, they won't be able to actually spend the money on things that add creative value.
Right. Now, obviously, creatives and producers will kind of say that what it gains in efficiency, it loses in creative freedom at the agency level. That the producers and the creatives are in charge of that triple bid process, at least in the production standpoint. But choosing any vendor really becomes a creative choice, and that by limiting that that level of choice, although it does speed up the efficiency, that it limits choice. What do you kind of think about that?
I mean, the triple bidding process should continue to exist, and we do need to continue to bring the best talent for the best project. There are conversations that are being had at a different level, which is if you as a brand are trying to build a consistent voice, because that's what's going to bring you recognition and get out of the sea of sameness. Because we keep talking about triple bid and bringing the right talent. Over the last 5 years, we've seen that there is a massive homogenization of the look and feel of everything that we produce. I mean, we've been seeing since COVID, right? We used to even make fun of during COVID of how every commercial looked exactly the same. We've seen in automotive how it feels almost interchangeable. So there is a less than an efficiency play. It's a brand decision play on which, if we're trying to create a specific tone of voice, what is the balance between looking at new talent time over time versus, for some clients, having a consistent pool of people? Meaning Wes Anderson uses a group of collaborators because he has a very specific look, and time over time they grow together and they build it together. When I look at some of the most iconic chief creative officers that I work with throughout my career, they tend to have a very small pool of directors and collaborators that they tend to work with. I mean, there was no surprise early in my career that chief creative officers like Cheryl Berman had a very close relationship with directors back in the day, like Joe Pitka, right? And they understood each other. They understood the voice that each other had, and they were experimenting together. And that relationship leads to work that helps build iconic brands back in that day. It's not the efficiency play. The efficiency play works when you're trying to not duplicate shoots, not waste things, when you're not all the things that you can look at a bigger picture, when you realize that you have brands that are doing similar commercial different times of the year and you can bring together. So it's a lot more operational. That's where the efficiency play comes from. From a creative point of view, and that's good and that adds value. From a creative point of view, it's a decision about brand-driven decision on, is it better to work closer with one director or a team of people or a smaller pool of people that understand our brand so we don't have to brief them time over time? Or is it better to open every time to a number of people? I can tell you that in Omnicom and some of the agencies that we have, you have some brands like DirecTV, where we do the pigeons, where we always bring the same team. But it's not an efficiency play. You don't have to explain. It's a very strong brand. And if it's a very specific creative, you don't have to explain to somebody over and over what the brand is all about.
Yeah. It's interesting because, obviously in the 90s and 2000s, if creatives had their way, and they did back then, it was always make whatever film you want and then slap a logo on the end. And actually, the goal was really to get the logo to be as small and as short as possible. They were always trying to make the best film, and that didn't always make for the best ad. I remember, when 180 was doing, one of your agencies was doing, PlayStation, there was a sort of moment where PlayStation said, and I think they still do, they slapped the PlayStation logo right up front so that you know what ad you're about to watch. And then they put it at the end as well. And there was a lot of complaints, but those ads didn't stop winning awards. In fact, they started winning even more. And, and I do think that sometimes I think that it's not always a bad thing. At the end of the day, the goal of these brands is to sell more product and have a piece of media that achieves that end. And I don't think it's a dirty thing to ensure that all the way down the pipeline, that's respected.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about very big things as if they're one thing each. And I think that a lot of it's a very nuanced conversation. There is an evolution of platforms where people are watching content. There's a difference between a commercial in the Super Bowl where you have a captive audience that is actually looking forward to watch commercials, and that would lead to beautiful cinematic storytelling, or what it's been storytelling, like, or comedy, whatever it is, but it's clearly an entertainment captive space. But when you go in at a time where more and more of that content is playing in skippable platforms or things where people can skip or not engage with, you have to get very sharp on getting people on the screen. And I mean, as somebody who has seen a teenager at home over the last few years, the things that they engage with are very, very different. Like the stuff that made me join this business and the stuff that I love usually started with, we're going to put something that doesn't look like a commercial. You open in a beautiful white shot. I can tell you that everything that starts with a beautiful white shot, that generation of people goes straight into the skip button. So it needs a slightly different type of storytelling. So that's one.
Now it has to start with conflict and a slap in the face and somebody getting drenched with something. Yeah.
Or maybe with a brand, because when they see a brand like PlayStation or a brand like, which we do work for them, at least they know that the content is going to be entertainment, it's going to be legit, and it's going to be interesting. But you need to be that formula actually works for them, because they're more prone towards something that comes from PlayStation or Apple or Adidas. It's like, okay, this is going to be cool content versus you're just gonna God knows what this is going to be. I'm not interested. I actually came here to watch something, and you're stopping me from doing it. So again, like that's from a platform point of view, making sure that people don't skip it. And also we talk about television commercials, and we put in the same boat Guinness Surfers or 1984, like some of the best work, with a lot of the work that is volume work. And I think that there is a nuance between one and the other, and a different space. And there is the work, and every industry has that. Fashion has that. It's almost like talking between couture and pret-a-porter. Music has that. Every industry has that. And we cannot treat everything like one or the other. We do need to protect the creativity on those iconic, creative, cultural, cinematic pieces. But we do need to get very smart on producing everything else, which is actually the majority of what the industry is. And there you have retail brands like in the States, like Walmart and Target and Aldi and CVS. You have automotive brands that they all need to churn a lot of work on a regular basis. That's where you have pharma commercials. And that's a big part of the industry. And it's not that one is better than the other. They just operate at different levels, and we do need solutions for different things, and they have value on different things.
Yeah, there's been a lot made, and I've spoken about it on here as well, about the the producers sort of moving into the holding company as a service. And I've actually found, the more I've looked into it, that to be a bit of a red herring, because it's the notion that, Omnicom with all these offices sits elsewhere. At the end of the day, Omnicom owns all these agencies. So where else are the producers going to sit but in TBWA, Shite Day and Goodby? And, there's that office space sitting there. So naturally, producers who are localized to that region are going to be sitting in those offices. Is that the understanding that, that it's really just a reality on paper, not really a physical reality?
I mean, the journey that we're doing with production is very similar to the journey that media did 20 years ago. And now media is for every holding company is the biggest unit. So when we're looking at all production people becoming part of the same team, yeah, I mean, like the production teams are coming together.
But
a
they're still
year ago.
sitting in the agencies. They're still close to the creative, isn't that right? Or are they physically moving?
No, I mean, the buildings that we have are the buildings that we have.
Yeah, that's sort of what I meant. Yeah. Yeah, there's nowhere else for them to go. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind
meaning
of
like we don't have another building other than the buildings that we have. It's a funny conversation, right? Because especially in the last few years, when we did it, the first time that we did it was at Craft in London, when we did at McCann and Craft in London, and it was and they look at it as people always look at the future thinking about just doing the same things of the past, and they rarely stop to think about the possibilities of when you do this, what you are actually unlocking. And for people that have a passion for creativity and the making, bringing the community of makers together makes a lot of sense because it just makes everything more fluid, especially when you're trying to innovate with things that are not traditional or that are not straightforward. Again, when I was in band, think about like survival billboard or campaigns like that don't fit in any specific media and actually made work very well for Microsoft and for the agency. And that was, people had a very tough time wrapping their heads around it. And they were sitting in the proximity to the creative was very important. Now in 2025, we're talking about proximity to the creative, where if you read any advertising magazine, people are having a tough time having people coming back to the office. So it's a tricky conversation to reconcile. Of course, I sit close to the creative, especially when we have, again, the buildings that we have. I sit in the Avenue of the Americas building where there are 10 other agencies in all the floors that we have. But even with that, we still don't have the number of people coming back to the office that we used to have a few years ago. So when people say, where do the producers sit? They sit on shoots. Some of them sit at home most of the time, and to get to and same thing with the creatives, which is becoming a much more fluid. It's not like everybody's coming to the office all the time. It's become a much more fluid relationship. So physical proximity it's become a concept that is quite strange at the moment.
Is there a potential example where somebody who's in New York, who's only being allocated at 50% of their time, ends up working, remotely for a creative team at Goodby?
But yeah, we do that all the time. Yeah.
And do you find that works well? Is there a difference that you notice between a producer functionally working with a creative team they're in the same building as versus being a time zone away?
We seems to be doing very well in awards this year. We've done some iconic work.
Yeah.
And it's a concept. I can put a couple of provocations over there, right? Such as, it's like saying an agency in San Francisco never hire a freelance producer in LA or New York. I know that all those agencies have hired freelancers that are in other cities for decades. When I was living in Chicago and working at Kramer Castle, I can tell you of 3 or 4 people that we use regularly for campaigns that were based in San Francisco and New York. Distance didn't seem to be the problem 10, 20 years ago. Doesn't seem to be the problem now. What that allows us to do is actually be able to do it does 2 things that I think are very important for the work. Be able to fit the right producer to the right project. People that have a passion for certain things be able to match it to the right project. And from a career point of view, career development point of view from our teams is fantastic, because that means that both from a client expertise, where you want to work, it provides a lot more opportunities. At a time, remember, where production departments are a fraction of what they used to be 10, 20 years ago. So when you're in a production department of 20 people, you have the opportunities that you have, and you have the opportunities within the agency that you have. When all of a sudden you open that to 3,000 briefs, which is roughly what we do every year, it's fantastic. I mean, which producer in Chicago doesn't like the idea of working for Goodby, Shy a Day? It's you're talking about 180, which we have in LA. Be able to pull people. It's from a career progression, it's a fantastic thing to be able to do.
And are you talent matching as well? I mean, do you kind of go, this person has great experience in sports, and so we're able to put them on, are you looking at it in that granular level from a talent development standpoint?
So we often, actually, the meeting that I had right before this podcast was with what we call our TCH, which is talent coordination, which sits in Chicago, and it's a team of people that look at every single brief. What is the right match for the brief? They manage our freelancers, so we bring the right freelancers as well. And when people join the team, we do a little of a scrap of what kind of work have they done in the past, what are the things, and what are the things also. One of the programs that we launched in January this year was our career mentorship program. And it's exactly that, is what do people want to do? Where do people want to go? And how do we help them get there through the projects that they do? Do Do they want to get expertise on something? Do they want to have international experience? What is developing the talent of the future was a big thing for us, and that is managed. So that's why we created a team that is solely focused on doing that on a national level.
One of the other things that you guys are doing, which I think is amazing, is you're obviously very forward thinking about your tech. You're working with the Adobe content supply chain. You have ArtBot, you have Omni, you have you're using a lot of technology across from strategy to creative to production to post to delivery systems to A/B testing and all that kind of stuff. All of the the stuff that people who work in day-to-day agencies often don't see, that is such a huge value proposition of a massive holding company. Obviously I'm interested in, we were talking with Andre Vargas, who's the chief data officer at CAA. And he was, really talking about the difference between, obviously they're talking about AI, but they're really focused on generative AI. He's like, we've been using machine learning on our data forever and getting a lot of really great stuff out of it. We're not as focused on generative AI. I'm interested to know, looking at your systems, what are you doing from a machine learning standpoint? And then, what are you doing from a machine learning and data standpoint?
We're looking at data in three ways right now. One is making sure that the briefs that we have help us understand the audiences that we're going to. And that's when things, and before I get into this conversation so people don't get mistaken, it's not a polarized conversation about one or the other, right? Like, it's not an exclusive, it's not creative or data, it's creative and data. And doing one doesn't mean that the other one is exclusive. So we've been talking about creative and creative value. Now, if we're talking about data, we do need to understand audiences. Media understands audiences. We're targeting the content. So we do need to understand, what do we need to do to make sure that that content becomes less skippable or is more relevant or is more personalized. And that starts with, even before we go and shoot stuff, we need to understand who's going to, because that leads to what we call modularized content. And that's where we're now in kind of like a weird conversation, because once you talk about modularized content and say, well, this commercial, we need to shoot certain things in a different ways and some modules to make sure that we can use it globally for multiple audiences. All of a sudden is this thing of, we want to triple bid it, but production companies don't want to engage it because they just want a linear one version kind of thing, right? And that's where we all need to level out. I appreciate that there's a lot of 1990s nostalgia. I was in the 90s. I really enjoyed it. Have a lot of photos and t-shirts, but that's not the world that we live right now. And that's where we all need to evolve together. Some brands, not all the brands, I'm not talking about Super Bowl commercials, they do need that right now. They need modular content to drive to personalizations. The first one is data to understand audiences and what content do we need to capture for those audiences and markets. Audience to market nuances to cultural vetting. That is the first stop that we do that. During the production process, we use a lot of efficiency spend data. It's like, what are we doing? How are we working? What are the things that what can help us work better and more efficient, just to show the client the value that we bring to them. And then all the data on optimization, which goes back to the beginning. Because then if we can tell the client, these are the people that we were talking to, this is how much it took to make it happen, we optimize it, and then we have the performance data, which is on the media teams, we can start having a conversation about return on investment to the client. And it's a different conversation. Then the conversation is not about, I need to save you 5% on production or 10% on production. Is you might have spent more than, you might not have had savings on production, but the value that is adding because of the way that it performed is that. Or this is the value for your brand on investing on creative. See, when we do a very creative piece, this is the outcome. When we don't, this is the outcome. And be able to have conversations that are more level-headed, because that's what clients want right now. Budgets are very tight, and predictability and understanding if they're spending the money on the smart way, it's very, very important to them. And when you think about it, it's no different to how we behave as people at home. Right? When we're going to buy something in Amazon, we want something that has the high rating. We want something that we know that we're paying the right price. When we're going to buy an airplane ticket, we go to Expedia and compare different prices for hotels. That behavior is how clients translate that behavior into advertising. That's how clients are looking now at the business, because that's how they operate in the rest of their lives.
Yeah. One of the partners that you guys are working with are Adobe. I think Adobe has been further out front, I think, than most for tracking provenance and making sure that the generative things that they're offering to clients like yourself are as clean as they can possibly be. Obviously, using generative AI is, a hot button point. Everybody knows that it's coming. But obviously the copyright concerns are huge. You know, you guys can't be utilizing models that are potentially infringing on copyright, because the thing that will kill your relationship with your client fastest, I mean, Disney and NBC Universal just sued Midjourney for copyright infringement just yesterday or the day before. If you put a piece of media out there that infringes on copyright or even has it in its training data, and you get your client sued by Disney, Warner Brothers, NBC, whoever it is, by a multinational, that's potentially disastrous to their business. So how are you guys thinking about copyright concerns, and what are you able to do, and where do you see it going?
So what we've done is we developed a curated number of platforms that we call OmniAI on generative AI. We've been developing that, a team led by Paulo and Jonathan have been developed that for a couple of years. It's a great solid platform with a number of partners where
And what does the platform do?
Everything around generative AI. So text, image, video, apart from other things on briefing and things like that. It's in the same way that we have Omni for data, we have OmniAI for creation of images. And by the way, when you were talking about like data stuff, we have Omni for data, Omni Pro for production management, and OmniAI for AI. And those three things work together. So the way that we curated OmniAI, there are platforms that we do have an understanding of how the models have been trained, and we have indemnification policies. That's a decision that we consciously have made exactly for what you're talking about. Like, we work with some of the world's biggest brands. We're an American company, which is quite a litigious society. We don't want to be in a situation. We're taking the decision of being, even though sometimes it might limit our ability to be at the front of the spear, like at the edge of innovation, but it will make us good, safe, and reliable, which is what we want to be. So we have partnerships with obviously Adobe, with OpenAI, with Runway. I mean, I can go on and on. It's a number of platforms where the indemnification is at the center, and with platforms that we know how they're training those materials. And when we do work with clients, they do it through us. That's why we don't use all the platforms that people are using, where indemnification is not part of the agreement, and we actually block it. We don't allow our teams to use it. It doesn't work on any computer in the company to prevent those kind of situations.
And so does that mean, I mean, it sounds like you've already kind of sorted out that rights management part of it. Does that mean that where are you currently able to use generative AI? Is it already coming out in product, or are you still using it only in creative development? And, where are you?
Creative development, we're using it a lot. It's almost like a bookend. It's definitely transforming the back end of the business when you look at localization, translation, global versioning, because synthetic voice translation, we have Mother Tongue, which is our translation unit that uses actually Mother Tongue. Is our translation unit works with Google, helping them develop the language models, multilingual language models. We know how it is to train that model very, very well. So everything on that scale, versioning, global adaptation, that is very, very quickly. And a lot of that is live for a lot of clients. For some of the work that is going live, creative development for sure, like the world of stimuli creative development, the way we do storyboards, animatics, that's becoming very fast in the front end. And we have some really good work. I mean, just this year alone, just in the last 3 months alone, in the UK, we've done the Temptations campaign, because it was a campaign for cat food and cats disguised as dogs, because they realized that dogs get treats and cats don't, and that cannot be done. But that's what I like about that campaign. It's something that is done in AI, because it couldn't be done in live action, and it would have been very difficult to do in CGI, dressing cats as dogs. And it's beautiful and it's great. We just launched it. I love that campaign.
It's done very well.
The PSAI campaign, which is, I love the song about like protecting from Columbia Journal. Great song, and some amazing shots, like getting all the memes to sing a song to make sure that people can differentiate between AI content and editorial AI content and not, so they don't spread fake news. And also from Goodby, we were talking about Goodby, be able to bring, because they have one of their accounts is the Dali Museum, and to bring to life one of a feature film that Dali had written that the studios in Hollywood didn't want to produce because of the complexity and it's Dali's mind, so imagine what it would have been. And we made the trailer partnering with Google. So there is work that is starting to come out. There's some limitations still on AI, especially when we talk about campaigns that are dialogue campaigns. It's difficult to make a lot of comedy, and we do a lot of comedy work. It has limitations when you have products and keeping the reliability of the product and even character consistency. Like Runway a couple of days ago just launched their new module, which provides. So there's things that are being worked through that make it difficult for some of the work that we do to use AI, but it's very quickly getting in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because I think that on a colloquial level, people have kind of looked at that Coca-Cola ad that was, done in AI, and they're like, well, they did it once. But I think that what people aren't realizing is that it is coming out. Sometimes it's being used as a tool. Sometimes it's being used, in a much broader way. But it's good to know that a lot of the copyright challenges are being answered. Is OmniAI in use in every single one of your agencies, or is it really kind of contained to Omnicom Production at the moment?
No, it's in use by agencies. We limit the number of people that are using it to make sure they're used in the right place. But it has, I want to believe that it has about 4,000 or 5,000 users at the moment.
God, that's incredible. I guess that means that, the AI advertising age is here and it's just getting started, but it's going to get, how far do you think you're away from creating an end-to-end fully AI ad?
That it could be done, I think that very, very quickly. I mean, we could do it today, but it's not just about the technology. It's about the people that know how to use the technology. And like the Wright brothers, when they first invented the plane, it only flew a football field, not because the plane couldn't fly longer, but because nobody had flown a plane before. So somebody was training how to be a pilot, right? Like somebody was trying to be a pilot on the first flight. You know what I mean? It's a little bit, or the first. I remember when I was in college, the first TV cameras were operated by engineers, not by artists, and because the cameras were so technical. I think that when we go, yes, the technology needs to get better, but there is people that are starting to use AI and know how to interact with AI and prompt AI. The work that I'm starting to see from AI creators is great and fascinating, and different people are starting to have their own styles. I mean, we're seeing stuff that we're seeing every time there's a new technology coming out, the whole cycle. What I think that we're going to see, or what I believe is, I'm not sure that they're going to do traditional television commercials. I think they're going to do something else. If there are more possibilities, why would you just do something from the past? Why wouldn't you do something of the future? Something that aligns more with that fast-paced content that people are looking for, things that are more personalized, things that are more relevant to the individual. I struggle to see a future where 10 years from now we will watch 30-second commercials.
You're right. There's a degree to which we're looking at AI and trying to make TV commercials when in fact AI is going to be doing something entirely different. I mean, that's what's so intriguing about Sam Altman and Johnny Ive, potentially working together on a screenless product. It's who's going to take us to that next realm where everything does look a little bit different and a little bit more AI native.
I don't know. I really don't know what it looks like, but I can see that the reason why we do 30-second commercials is, and one commercial is, that's what we can afford. I would pose questions to the table as like, what would we do if cost wasn't an issue? Right? Because I was just watching today a behind the scenes, and the entire behind the scenes was done in AI, which I thought it was hysterical. And included like a whole city flooding and a tornado, like things that if I wanted to do on CGI would have cost hundreds of thousands and weeks of work. So of course it's not an issue, and you can do anything, and you know who you're talking to, and you know that they want to, they're they will connect with you for like 10 seconds max. What will you do? Maybe the concept of episodic advertising is something that is, instead of just doing one 30-second commercial, maybe it's a sequence of shorter commercials. Maybe it's a different conversation. Maybe something that is, I can see a massive number of possibilities. I cannot see AI just replicating what we're doing today, because it's something that has a lot of challenges, and has that expiration date.
But yeah, so I mean, do you, I was listening to somebody speak where they were talking about the difference between a creative and a creator. And a creative is somebody who requires an infrastructure or a brand or a studio or a production infrastructure. Whereas a creator is somebody who is both creative and producer in and of themselves. Do you, how do you see that balance happening in the future?
I mean, that's how we're talking now about the role of about the role of creative agencies and the role of Omnicom Production is, and where we see the industry going. We see the advertising agencies going to a much more higher and strategic role, where they're working with brands on setting up what is their brand strategy, what is the master brand, what is the creative platform, meaning like what is that underpinning thing where everything comes out of. And our role is platform creative, meaning once you have that master brand idea, once you have like that big thing, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to fit into that, where you don't need people that challenge the strategy. You just need people to continue building on top of that. So that's the difference between creative platform and platform creative. That's the difference between a creative and a creator.
And do you think that you're going to be training your producers up to be more creative, or the creative is going to be trained up to be more like producers, or does everybody sort of become a one person creative production entity, with all the power of creation?
No, I don't think I think it'll be very difficult to find people that are good at everything or that are even interested in everything, which is why when digital happened. But I also know that the roles are going to change, meaning people that do in the production area where we actually have planners and creatives and producers and makers. The role of a producer is going to be somebody that is actually an orchestrator and a facilitator, and especially when you have a lot of things happening at the same time. But I expect in my team people like designers, for example, my design team to be designers that make stuff, not designers that then have to go to the studio and work with I don't know, motion designer to do something. I would imagine that are people that are making things in the same way that usually people from strategy sometimes need to be able to write or to be able to express themselves in a way. So I think that you can synthesize it into things. One, people need to be more about making, more hands-on. That the world where PowerPoints were the output in my world, in the world of OP, that's not sustainable. That's not where it's going to be. Like, people need to always be able to make stuff, and producers need to be able to orchestrate all those people that are making things. But creativity is something that truly has to flow throughout the whole organization, which we've been talking about for years, right? Like when we've been saying everybody has to be a creative, everybody has to truly be a creative. We cannot have the wealth of somebody who understands creative and the other people are key pushers. It's not sustainable. Again, like if somebody's just a key push, that would be replaced by AI very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good point. Well, Sergio, I have one more question that I've been asking everybody, which is the late, great Dan Wyden had a great quote that I always love, which is, "You're useless to me until you've failed big at least twice." And it's always to me, a very comforting thing, because it meant to me that your boss couldn't yell at you that bad if this was one of your big two failures.
It's very humbling. It's very humbling, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, can you remember a time you failed and what you learned from it?
I can remember more than one time. I can remember many, many, many times, and I think about them all the time.
Well, we have time. I don't want to take too much of your time, but if as many of them as you'd be willing to tell us, we'd be happy to hear it.
No, it's always good when people just see the output, but it's like any business. And I've tried. I always try to go to places where to poke holes at things and try to go to places and think about new ways of doing things. And that meant that sometimes I had to go places where people hadn't been before, or done things that people hadn't been before. So there's a huge amount of mistakes along the way. I can assure you that most of the times I get it wrong. It's also true that I've been really lucky to have the bosses and mentors that I had that taught me how to fail fast and how to smell very quickly when something was going in the wrong direction. But I made many mistakes on where I thought what was the way of doing things. And I have lots of lessons around my career. I learned the difference between what you can put in a PowerPoint and then what you can actually bring to life, right? And working with talent, I made mistakes on the time invested in certain things, or time on jobs that I've taken. Yeah, I had a whole book full of lessons, learned. I think that the things that I learned from that is, one, knowing that playing it safe never has led to anything good. Like failing is part of the process. And there is a difference between failing and negligence. Meaning there's a difference between I tried to explore and I realized that I went in the wrong way, so we just went somewhere else, and not doing the basics, right? Like I don't have a lot of patience for negligence. So that is one. Is just never give up trying, never be complacent with myself and allow the teams to do it. I think that's the second one, is allow everybody to grow through their own journey and allow them sometimes to do some of the things that I did, even though I know that it's not going to go to the right place, or I feel that it's not going to go to the right place, just because they would learn and they will become stronger and actually bring people closer. The third thing is the value of a team, is how this is a team business and a people business, and how it's all about having um, collaborators and people that work closely and people that are part of the journey. Yeah, that would be like the three lessons that I've learned on all the hundreds of times that I got it wrong.
I think it's interesting that you brought up failing quickly, because I do think that that's a huge part of the creative process, no matter what part you're in, is, okay, you can expect failure, but please do it quickly, get over it fast, and move on to whatever the next thing is.
I think a lot of the times that I failed it was having unrealistic expectations of what people could do and what they could deliver. We were talking about, you were saying, are we going to have talent that can do everything? There was a time when we were looking for the integrated producer, right, which was a producer that could do TV, digital, print all at once and understand directors and trafficking sheets and QA of websites, and that was a thing. That was a thing for a time, and I tried to build it, but
yeah, they never really materialized, those unicorns, did they?
then they never really materialized. And I did learn a valuable lesson over that, which I owe to that lesson possibly part of my career. And even though I grew up in a culture of there are no rules and it's all about breaking the rules, there is something to be learned about companies that run their business as their business. And when you're trying to change what people do, you do need to invest time educating people. And you do need to mentor people. And you do need to do things that feel a little bit grown up and that we frown upon in the advertising business, so dismiss as corporate, but it actually made a difference. That's why, for example, I wouldn't, if I hadn't failed then, now that we're building Omnicom Production with a vision, and our vision was, well, this is the first production unit for a new world of creativity and AI. We cannot expect a group of 3,500 people that overnight they're all going to be query masters and understand AI, and that they all even want to do it. So that's why I knew that from very quickly a big part of our success was going to be our training program and education program and our mentorship program. And it was the first thing that we announced in January, as soon as we finished the whole process of bringing all Omnicom Production together. It was literally the first thing in the new year that we launched. Before we talked about a lot of other things. Everybody is in their program. That's part of their year appraisal, right? So we went through everybody, see what they are. We ask questions about where do they find themselves in their career? What do they want to do? What is the areas that they see of growth? What does their manager see that they can help, and how we do that? We have a training program with modules. We have a mentorship program, and that is starting next month, where we connect people with mentors to help them unlock in certain parts of their career. But that is critical to be able to do that.
Wow. Well, fantastic. Sergio, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time and for doing this. It's lovely to see you. And I think, there's been a lot of, like I said, there's been a lot of stuff out there about what you guys are doing. I think, some is quite a bit is misinformation, I think. And I think just a lot of fear of the future. And I think it sounds to me like you're doing some really interesting stuff. And I think, I think the future looks bright and interesting.
We'll get it wrong a lot of times, but we know that where we're going, we feel that just staying the same where we are and staying static is not sustainable. So we're just figuring out what is our path and what we clearly see. We have a point of view of what the future is, and we're just trying to figure out how we get there quickly.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Orlando.
So good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. So good to see you, Orlando.